Good afternoon, one and all. Today we have with us Dr. Kavita Lakha, and she is going to deliver our topic standard of Epiphyseal Union in South African children. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation for delivering a lecture in our international lecture series. She has a good number of experience, and along with my co-host Priya Singh, I welcome you once again, ma'am. Ma'am is a special investigator and forensic anthropologist in a National Prosecuting Authority, Johannesburg area, South Africa. I request my co-host Priya to give a brief introduction about our esteemed speaker. Priya, over to you.
Yes, sir. Thank you, sir. Good morning, ma'am. I would like to introduce you to all the participants. Dr. Kavita Lakha is currently working as Special Investigator and Forensic Anthropologist at National Prosecuting Authority, NPA, Johannesburg area, South Africa. She has completed a BSc undergraduate degree at the University of Witwatersrand and has also done honors in anatomy at University of Witwatersrand. She has received the Nelson Mandela Scholarship and studies at the University of Central Lancashire, where she did a master's degree in forensic anthropology and crime scene investigation. She has received her Ph.D. in human biology at the University of Cape Town in 2016. She began working for the Missing Persons Task Team in 2009 and currently still serves as a forensic anthropologist. The Missing Persons Task Team is responsible for locating and recovering the remains of individuals who died during the human rights abuse of apartheid in South Africa. She has also experience in ballistic trauma, explosive trauma, juvenile age estimation, which is an area of strength. Ma'am, would you like to tell about what is apartheid?
Apartheid in South Africa was a period in which the white people in South Africa at that time oppressed people of color, so Black people, Indian people, and we have people of mixed race called colored people. So it was a forced rule on people of non-color. So during this time in apartheid, we found that there were a lot of crimes committed by the state, and that was responsible for some people went missing, some were murdered by the state, some were killed during inter-civilian violence. And it is our job as the Missing Persons Task Team, so government gave us the mandate to go and look for these individuals that died and went missing during apartheid. So it's also considered to be a crime against humanity because of the oppression of one onto the other.
Thank you so much, Priya, for a nice introduction to our esteemed speaker. I hand over session to you. Now you can take over the session.
I will. So good morning to you from not so sunny South Africa, where it's currently past 10:30 in the morning, but I understand it's afternoon in India, so very good afternoon to you all. And namaste, because I know we share the same greeting as well. So as Priya and Dr. Ranjit kindly introduced me, my name is Dr. Kavita Lakha. I'm a forensic anthropologist in the Missing Persons Task Team. And I was also awarded the Mail and Guardian 200 Young South Africans Award many years ago. And I still serve as a forensic anthropologist in the Missing Persons Task Team. So the talk that I'm going to give you today is my PhD, which was done in 2015. Although it's 5 years old, I have done some work before doing this presentation. And it's still valid for today because nobody has published any standards for South African children. Although it's been 5 years, I think that the delay was well warranted, and lockdown in South Africa has given me the chance to actually do this important work of delivering this presentation, number one, and number two, to publish this presentation as well. So today I'm going to be talking to you about Epiphyseal Union. and the creation of standards in a South African population. So what is epiphyseal union? Epiphyseal union is a process during our growth, which, if you can see the diagram on the right, it happens in the long bones, and also the ribs, vertebrae as well have epiphyseal union. And it's the long bone, the metaphysis, which fuses with a cap at the top, which is called the epiphyses. And this epiphyses unites to the metaphyses at a specific age, and it's also it comes after the peak of the pubertal growth spurt, so it comes after the growth spurt in both males and females. Epiphyseal union is also, it's affected, or one of the factors that control epiphyseal union is our hormones. So in females, for example, estrogen is responsible for bone maturation, and you'll often find in these types of studies that females will show a 1 to 3 year advance compared to males. So where are these studies used? So epiphyseal union studies are not only used in forensic anthropology, where we have only human remains available, they're also used in cases of asylum seekers. So as we see currently, there's a large influx of African people into the European Union. And the European Union uses these standards to determine whether an individual is under the age of 18 or over the age of 18. And according to these asylum laws, it helps them to determine whether they're going to be treated as juveniles or whether they're treated as adults. There have been some studies as well which have used epiphyseal union for age estimation in sport. So what has happened in sport, and there's specific cases of soccer, for example, where the chronological age of the individual doesn't match their biological ages. So these individuals, they have age categories. So for example, the age category will be 10 to 11. These individuals are often older, and when they join the younger cohorts, what happens is that they are seen to have an unfair advantage over their younger peers. So it's been useful in sport as well. They've been used in humanitarian forensic crises, such as the wars in Srebrenica, in tsunamis, where we don't have enough information or soft tissue to do identifications. In India, for example, and you can correct me because I'm sure you have more recent statistics and information. So from the recent articles that I've read is that the consensual age for sex in India is 16 years. But these studies have been used to determine whether or not the victim is under the age of 16. And if she is under the age of 16, how the perpetrator is then prosecuted may be more severe if she's under 16 years of age. Myself, for example, I use age estimation studies for cold cases. Our cases are often 20 to 30 years old. And even though the majority of the cases are over 20 years, we do have some cases which are between the ages of 18 to 20. And these studies have proven to be useful for those cases. So historically speaking, the earliest studies of epiphyseal union go back to 1929 by individuals called Grulich and Pyle, and maybe some of you have come across their atlas. So they have created an atlas where they've taken radiographs of children at specific ages, and it's specifically radiographs of the hand and wrist, actually bones of the hand and the wrist. And what they've done is they took pictures of every age and they published that in an atlas. In order to determine the age of an individual, you would go with your radiograph and you go to the book or the atlas and you try to match which one suits your individual. However, presently in South Africa, there have been studies which have been used on our contemporary population, but they have found that they overestimated age and they underestimated age. And we've also found that they're not very good at differentiating between the different races. So this is it's not really a great standard for us in South Africa at the moment. So similar to Grulich and Pyle, in 1975, we have Tanner and Whitehouse who compiled similar standards. However, theirs was more descriptive, and it takes into account the variation of the growth in size and shape of epiphyses over our maturation phase. So it takes more of the variables into account. They were one more than just an atlas. They developed something called a scoring system. And if you see on the left-hand side of this image, you can see they came up with a scoring system, which is associated to a stage. So the stages deal with how big the epiphyses, how the margins of the epiphyses look. And they came up with a scoring system. And in this scoring system, you can find that they have a maturity score, which is often the sum of the assessment of the epiphyses, which are then correlated to a bone age. And as you can see, as the maturity score increases, sorry, the slide. As we see, the maturity score increases, there's also an increase in the bone age, so the age of the individual. So age estimation studies are done primarily and not exclusively in one of two ways. We do macroscopic observations of skeletal material. Excuse me, these are often the samples of human remains at universities. So anatomy departments have cadavers which are then donated to these bone collections, which students then study to develop their standards for epiphyseal union. So the problem with these is that there's a lack of sample. We have or are limited to a specific age of individuals. Some studies have also been used or derived from war dead. So there have been studies on the Bosnian population, which were primarily males over the age of 17. And the problem with using this kind of a sample is that they miss the critical window of epiphyseal union, which takes place at the younger ages. These collections also have a scarcity of juvenile and infant remains, and they are also affected by secular trends. So the modern populations are affected by rapid increases in growth, decreases in the age of monarch, and growth in height and weight. So these affect contemporary populations, so they have to be used with caution in modern populations. The second way of conducting these studies is the radiographic studies. And these studies are based on X-rays. So the advantage is that there's a larger sample to draw from to conduct these studies. They also represent the contemporary population, but there is issues about the unethical exposure of individuals to X-rays. There are previous studies which have been conducted, but the X-ray studies deal specifically with joints because in the past it was very, when we go into the hospital, if you have a broken leg, they'd only take an X-ray of your leg, for example. So you only have information about the leg, and that's the standards that were developed. So there are other age estimation studies that were done, but on a South African population. It was done on an X-ray, but this study measured the lengths of the diaphyses and the breadths of the epiphyses. So the study derived univariate and multivariate equations with prediction intervals to estimate age in children under the age of 12 years, so birth to 12 years. They were limited to use in children under the age of 12, and they showed that they had lower prediction intervals for the older children. There's a larger variation in the diaphyseal length in the older children, and there's less variation in the younger children. That's why it made it more accurate to actually use the standard on the younger children. These intervals were shown to increase in the adolescent period because of the variation in the growth spurt. So it's less accurate to use in the older children, but also the restriction is that it's only up to the age of 12. So the need to develop new standards for South Africans was that there were no standards for other epiphyses of the body besides the ones that were used for the hands and the wrist of Grulich and Pyle. There's also been some suggestions that if we assess multiple joints of the body, we are able to get a more accurate age assessment, which is always a better idea. In South Africa, for example, we've had a study called the Birth to 20 study, where children who were born in the year that Nelson Mandela was released from prison were admitted to a longitudinal study to determine the effects of growth on these children. They found that there was a positive secular trend in height, a decrease in the menarche age in females, and also they found that these were favorable conditions which promoted these conditions in the population. So we can see that secular trends have affected the South African population, and it developed a need to develop new standards. Finally, the last part of the aim of the study was to see whether or not we could actually use data which we were collecting on radiographs to use them on studies of forensic cases involving human remains. So the factors which affect union are most definitely puberty, because of the onset of puberty in females, which occurs about 2 years earlier in females compared to males. The socioeconomic factors, which will affect your nutrition, for example. People who are malnourished or who are poor have less access to good quality food of nutritional value and will be malnourished. The chronic malnourishment, for that matter, will result in the stunting of children and delayed maturation. We haven't seen that. We've seen a positive secular trend, so that's an interesting factor to consider. And as a sign of nutritional status, menarche age is used for this. So this brings me to the LODOX. The LODOX stat scan system was developed in South Africa by De Beers Mine, and it was developed to scan individuals who worked there to make sure that they weren't stealing any diamonds. But none can express the excitement more than me than the showcasing of this unique piece of material. And this clip is taken from Grey's Anatomy. So please enjoy it, bear with me.
And now, what you have all been waiting for, the LODOX, low-dose radiation X-ray stat scanner. It provides full-body anterior and lateral views. The low radiation makes imaging safer for children and pregnant women. It is our most cutting-edge tool in diagnostic technology. Murphy.
When can we use it? Oh, I'll volunteer. When I was 6, I stuck a marble up my nose and it never came out. We checked my stool for over a year.
Listen, this is not a toy. I know we all want to see this thing in action, but be patient. The last thing we need is some line forming when some real trauma comes in.
Chief Hunt, we've got an ATV accident 2 minutes out.
Here we go.
All right, it's all set.
Avery, would you do the honors?
Six, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13.
Look at that. Worth every penny.
You can see the fractures of both legs and of the proximal aspect of the right radius and ulna all in the same X-ray. It would have taken like 15 scans to get that much information before. It's freaking magical.
It's definitely worth waiting for.
Yes, it is definitely worth waiting for. So we've been using this system in South Africa since 2005. They were introduced into the hospitals in the Western Cape earlier than they were over here in Johannesburg. So a lot of my sample comes from the Western Cape of South Africa. But as it suggests, the video suggests that it takes a full body anterior, posterior, longitudinal radiograph in 13 seconds. It's safe to use in pregnant women and in children. I've actually seen scans of pregnant ladies underneath the radiograph, in the radiographs, and they are phenomenal. So a little bit about my sample. My study sample, I assessed over 10,000 images to end up with a final sample of 2,220 individuals. You can see the distribution of the sample shows that it's bimodal, where we have very large numbers of individuals from 2 to 7 years, and then it decreases and increases from 12 to 19 years again. There is definitely less females than males, and this has been shown in most of the research so far, that there is just generally less females in the sample. On the right-hand side, you can see that these are the institutions where we got these scans from, and the Red Cross, Groteskir, Tygerberg, Salt River are all the facilities in the Western Cape, and the Chris Hani and Molpaka here in Johannesburg. The dart collection was a skeletal sample I used from the University of Witwatersrand from cadavers. I also find it very interesting to find out what's happening with the sample, why they're there. And in this bottom graph pie chart, the most prevalent cause of individuals entering the hospital in South Africa are from motor vehicle accidents. And the second largest group were from gunshot wounds, so violence indeed. So for the first stage of my union, it was classified as stage 1 of non-infusion, where the epiphyses are either absent or they are much smaller than the metaphyses. They may exhibit a difference in the shape, and you can often see that they are smaller than the ones that than their metaphyses, and you can even see the proximal fibula, the epiphysis is much smaller. Stage 2 is classified as partial union of less than 50%. The diameters of the metaphyses and the diaphyses are similar, so they are similar in size, but there's still less than 50% union going on, and there's less than 50% of the adjacent sides that are touching. And this one of the shoulder, you can see that the head looks like it's in advance of the greater tubercle of the humerus, and it's scored as such. And then stage 3 is classified as greater than 50% of union of the adjacent areas are in contact. You can see visible islands of cartilaginous ossification, and there is an increase in the continuity of size. You can see the sizes are the same. And you can also see the distal femur is advance of the proximal tibia and fibula. And then we get complete union. Often they don't always have a scar of union, but in some cases they do, but you can see continuity in the two surfaces. So these are just sketches and radiographs at the top of the stages of union and how union progresses from a stage 1, where there's more continuity, greater than 50% union, and complete union. And these were done for all the major joints of the body. You can see in the elbow that there's no medial epicondyle, that there's a trochlea but no capitulum, and the smaller size of the proximal radius epiphyses. But I find that this is a great way to show how union does occur. Similar case in the wrist as well, where there's no epiphyses here in the distal radius, and that would be scored as a stage 1, for example. Stage 1 of the radius and the ulna, actually. And then it progresses to complete union. And this, you can see that there's a scar, an epiphyseal scar of recent union. Similar case with the knee. So the progression of union, this is the detail of my study, which looks very, very complicated. But if you just have a look here, it shows how at the earlier ages that union is 100%, but it progresses diagonally downwards until we have complete union in males around 18 years of age. But there's an easier way of showing this actually. So in this graph, at 6 years old, we see that about 75% of our female sample is still in stage 1. And it's a great way of viewing this because we can tell that the stages are not in isolation, that they are overlapping. They continue with one another. And we see that stage 1 is mixed with 2, 2 with 3, 3 with 4, until complete union of the proximal radius is seen in females around the age of 16 years. So there were some interesting features which we did pick up from this research. So studies do show that the medial epicondyle in the elbow is the last of the epiphyses to fuse. And we found this, that the trochlea and capitulum complete union first, followed by the lateral epicondyle, by the proximal radius, and finally the medial epicondyle. The similar thing can be seen in the females, but their data is very erratic due to the smaller sample sizes. Similar phenomena were found in the knee and has been also previously published. The distal femur progresses with union faster than the proximal tibia and fibula. You can see the curve is ahead of the proximal tibia and fibula. Similar phenomenon in females, but their data is a bit more erratic because of the smaller sample sizes. I think that future research does dictate that we need to get more females into this study before it can probably be called a standard. In the hip, the head of the femur completes its union before the greater and lesser trochanters. And females, it's unfortunately, it does show some semblance of that sequence. So McKern and Stewart in 1957 suggested that there's a series of the way the epiphyses unite, and they gave it an acronym called EHAWK. So the elbow, the hip, ankle, the knee, wrist, and shoulder. And in the present study, thankfully, we have found the same thing, that the elbow completes its union before the hip, the ankle, which are very close, followed by the knee, the wrist, and the shoulder and iliac crest follow very similar times and sequences of union. So it was the males. And it's evident that this process happens earlier in females. If I just go back to the males, you'll see that their curve is much later. But in females, our union starts being accomplished by the age of at least 15. So this was a very exciting scheme to come up with. And this just shows us the ages of union of my South African sample, and that how the females are usually between 1 to 3 years ahead of males in all of the joints. Compared to other world populations, it seems like our South African sample is it's delayed in its epiphyseal union, but I guess there are many more factors which have to deal with this delay. But that's why it's very important to develop population-specific standards to do epiphyseal union, because no two populations are the same. So in the second part of the research, my aim was to develop the standards on the radiographs, but to be able to use them in forensic cases, which involve only dry bones. So what we've done is we took some of the samples from the skeletal collection at the DART collection at the University of Witwatersrand, and we scanned them at the LODOX to see what we could find. And basically, we have found that there were an overlap of stages. So in the radiographic study of the contemporary population, we found that the metaphyses and the epiphyses were of different sizes. So we find that this is the case in the skeletal material, except that when you handle the skeletal material, the epiphyses is a separate joint, but they're still different sizes. So the difference in size is still there, it's just that it's a separate component. When we moved on to stage 2, the metaphyses and epiphyses, the sizes are the same, but like in the first stage, it appears as a separate component. In stage 3, you could see that there is, this is a stage 3 in the femur. You can see that there's greater than 50% union, and you can also see it on the bone that it's greater than 50% union, and complete union is complete union. So these are a few examples, and if we see that in the radiograph of this distal humerus, you can't really see that it's in stage 3 of union, but when we conducted a radiograph, we could see the epiphyseal lines that they were still fusing, and that was classified as a stage 3. Similarly, in this distal humerus, we find that there are no medial epicondyle, no capitulum, no trochlea, and that the radius is classified as, the epiphyses of the radius classified as a stage 1 because it's smaller in size. This was glued together at the collection, but the basis for it is that the size is different from the metaphyses. And in stage 3 of the iliac crest, you can see greater than 50% union. although you can't see it on the bone, you can see this growth of the epiphyses or the union taking place on the posterior aspect, the anterior aspect. So this was a very interesting part of the study because it showed that the test for intra-observer error showed that the scoring was very accurate. But in my opinion, it's a bit of a bias because I am the person who came up with the standard. I am the person who assessed the other 2,220 individuals. So a greater research, if I got another researcher to do the same scoring and see if we came up with similar results. So part of this study, similar to, I think it was Todd who created a scoring system. So what we did was we took the mean fusion scores per element. So it would be for the proximal radius, the distal radius for each element, or we took them for joints in a whole. So for a joint, we take the 5 elements that made up the joint of the elbow. We got a mean score, and that score was associated with an age and a standard deviation. So from this year, the mean scores were higher per age in females than in males, which we expected. And these tables allow us to extrapolate an age for a suspected stage of fusion at the elbow. So what do I mean by this? So this is just the union scores. And as I was saying, it was McKern in 1970 that came up with a total score, an age range, and predicted age. So this study attempts to do a similar thing. So we do it for the joints. And as I was saying, the joints are made up of more than one epiphysis. So it would be the greater tubercle for the shoulder and the head of the humerus. And the score divided by 2 would give us the mean score for that joint. A similar thing would be done for the elbow, where we score 5 different components and we divide it by 5. And that's how we get a mean score for these. Wrist is 2 elements, the hip was 3, knee 3, and the ankle was 2. So this is an example, and this is the poster child for my study for epiphyseal union. And we took the mean score for the elbow. So we measured each of the components, the 5 components, which were the medial epicondyle, trochlea, the capitulum, the lateral epicondyle, the proximal radius. We took each of those scores and we divided by 5, which gave us a score of 1.2, a mean score. So we take the mean scores, and these tables are published in the appendix of my thesis, where we take the mean score and we add and subtract a standard deviation, and it's associated with an age. So that's the one that was done for the joint, but we did a similar one for the proximal radius, just one of the epiphyses. And that one, it was just a stage 1. So the mean score was a 1, which gave us an age range of 6 to 7. In my opinion, this needs a lot more data before it can be used. But I think for now we have a basis, a starting point to start using this on our forensic cases. So that's the end from me. And I'm sorry that it's less than an hour's conversation, but thank you very much for listening. Priya?
Oh, yes, ma'am.
I'm done.
Yeah.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am. So those who have the question, you can raise your hand. I will unmute from here, and you can ask your question to the esteemed speaker, madam. Any participant? Anyone have the question? Any participant? Vinay Kumar, ma'am, Vinay Kumar have a question. How to calculate age by elbow?
So it's the epiphyseal union. It's the stages. There are 5 different components which we measured. It was the capitulum, the trochlea, the medial epicondyle, the proximal radius. So we measure the stage at which they are. So stage 1 would be non-union, 2 partial, 3 greater than 50%, and 4 complete union. So we give that a score, and you can use those individual components to go to the mean score onto that appendix that I showed you, and that can give you an estimated age range. So you can do it for a joint, or you can do it for an individual epiphyses as well.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. Any participant, they want to have a like ask direct question, you can raise your hand. I will unmute you. There is one question from Hari, and the question is, how can we investigate forensic case involving rape as mentioned above?
Sorry, I didn't get the question.
How can we investigate forensic case involving rape as mentioned above?
So in India, for example, I'm sure you as a forensic community should know more. There is an article which said that for rape cases, they were taking radiographs of the victim, and in a similar way, we check the epiphyses and we see if the individual is younger than 16. So each of these joints have an age where we see that they unite. So for example, the elbow is the first to unite. If the elbow is not united, which means that the individual female is younger than the age of 15, then we know that, okay, it's a very young person, and that's going to affect how we prosecute the perpetrator. But the sequence that I talked about earlier as well, EHawks, the elbow, the hip, ankle, knee, wrist, and shoulder. If we find that the shoulder is united by this age, it means the individual is already over the age of 21. So she's no longer under the consensual age for rape, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So Vinay, again have a question. Is there any standard for these scores? How do we calculate these scores?
So these scores were developed for the South African population. I did the entire basis work from these low-doc scans. My sample was 2,000 individuals, and I created these for the South African population, but I would be keen to help anyone else who would like to develop similar standards for their countries. So what we did after we developed, we scored each of the joints, we then associated with those mean scores, and the mean scores were associated to the table that was correlated to age. So it would have to be something that's done for your population, because from what we've seen, each population develops at its own pace.
Okay. John would have the question, how do we differentiate between a case of forensic significance and that of archaeological significance?
It's the age. So a forensic significance is we are individuals who work in a mortuary, and the police call us out and say, we found an individual who's partially skeletonized. That's a forensic significance. It depends on if the police have any information about missing persons. For example, somebody has come within the last 48 hours, within the last month, within the last 2 months, and they've told us that we are missing our child. She was about 12 years old. That's of forensic significance. But in archaeological significance, it will depend on the burial of the individual, how many years ago it was, what is the associated evidence with those burials, how deep were they? Because these will inform us whether they are archaeological or forensic in nature.
In continuation, Suryakant Solanki, he wants to ask, age determination by the process is admissible in the court of law? If it is admissible, what is the accuracy of the age?
It has not yet been used in South Africa in a court of law. We have not used it in any of our forensic cases, but there are 2 cases which are undergoing investigation in South Africa from our cold cases in the missing persons task team. And I will only know once they go to court about how admissible they are.
Okay, as far as India is concerned, these kind of age estimation was taken for help in investigating the case, and these evidences are admissible in the court of law. Famous cases like Nithari and others. Many expert forensic anthropologists from the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, they have reported these cases, and it is taken on the court record. So I'm just adding in that.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So is there any chemical analysis for calculation of bone age?
as far as I'm aware, there are some studies, but I didn't go into those because my major focus of the study was Epiphyseal Union. If I'm not mistaken, there are a scarcity of studies that do chemical influences or the chemical impact on union.
Yeah. So Emmanuel want to ask, can the score of population be used to determining the age of bone in another population? And if possible, what is the error margin?
So it hasn't been used on another population. Most of these forensic studies, they would recommend that we use them on the population from which they were derived. And the basis for that is based on the literature, which shows that, or even my result, which showed that the South African population was delayed in union compared to the Americans, compared to the Bosnian samples, for example. So I would caution against its use. I would, however, recommend that it's used in another population, but we'll have to form some kind of a collaboration where we look at the studies and the ages, and then we'll be able to see what the age differences are. That's as best as I could recommend at the moment.
Great. So any other member have the question? Let me check the YouTube live. So we have covered almost all the questions, ma'am. And on time, we have covered all the questions. So once again, I would like to thank you for taking out your time and giving an informative lecture. And you can read in our chat box that it was very well taken by all the participants. They are writing it's a very informative lecture. It is a well explained lecture. So they are getting something on this Sunday in this pandemic. So with this, I like to thanks to once again you for delivering this wonderful lecture. And as a part of our this webinar series, we always, although we are in a virtual space, but we give one certificate of appreciation to our eminent speaker for taking out time and giving their valuable input on the subject. So kindly accept it from the our side. And thank you so much for, and you know, every event is just because of our team member. So I would like to thanks all my team member, my dedicated team member, those who are working day and night and reaching to the people. And we are getting more and more registration in our future. Ruchika Divedi, Kanheri, Anmol, Nimisha, Priya, Falak, Lashika, Tahir, Raj, Shivani, Neha, Amala. So list is very long. So cutting short, we are just giving this because many of you have registered in this event, and for this pre-event, we provide the free certificate which you can download from our website, and website address is forensicevents.com/download certificate. You can go on the website. You just have to click on the pink button of the download certificate. You have to enter your email address, and after you enter your email address, whatever the event you have attended organized by our organization, Sherlock Institute of Forensic Science, you can download all your certificate. I'll give demo also. So here you will find that here you have to enter your certificate, registered email address or registration number if you have received, and this your certificate will appear like this. So with a ma'am signatures, and you can have this as a souvenir, as a memory for attending such a wonderful lecture. Thank you, ma'am, for taking out time, and I like to request you to give that closing remark for this lecture.
Thank you. So Dr. Ranjit, thank you very much for inviting me to speak. This is my very first online presentation, and it's also the first time that somebody else has gotten to see what work I did 5 years ago. I'd like to recommend that if anybody has any questions, would like to set up similar standards for your country, please get in touch with me. Ms. Priya has my contact details, and I would be more than willing to collaborate with anyone. So thank you again for the opportunity, Dr. Ranjit, and the Institute for Forensic Sciences.
Thank you so much. So as for our continuing, we are organizing this international lecture series on every Sunday. So next Sunday we have with Dr. Hani Jasan, and he is going to talk with us on impact of abuse on mental health and the child development. Soon we will share this registration link and other details on our social media platform. So you can follow us on Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, and our WhatsApp groups. So we have around 12 WhatsApp groups. So you can be a member of any of the WhatsApp groups. And with this, I would like to introduce our next September 2021 International Biennial Symposium in collaboration with AFHR on forensic odontology for the human right. So thank you all. Thank you for attending the session and have a good day. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.